The Saskatchewan prairie doesn't ask permission. It simply is, flat and enormous and indifferent, stretching in every direction until the sky has to come down and meet it, just to make the world feel finished. In July, the wheat turns the color of old honey and the wind moves through it in long, slow waves, like something breathing. In January, the same land becomes a place that tests whether a person truly wants to be alive. There is no softening it. There is no prettying it up. It is what it is, and the people who stay know that about themselves. Nora Sinclair had stayed. She was 31 years old, and she had a dog named Bishop, a half-repaired tractor, 40 head of cattle, and a silence in her house that had weight to it. The kind that settles in slowly, the way snow does, and becomes structural before you realize it's there. She had inherited the farm from her father when she was 26, 2 weeks after his funeral, and 4 months after her husband Marcus had taken his good boots and his guitar and driven south toward Calgary without leaving a note. She'd found the divorce papers on the kitchen table between the sugar bowl and the butter dish. That was how it ended. Not with a fight, not with a door slamming, with butter on one side and sugar on the other and nothing in between. She hadn't looked for anything since. Not a partner, not a reason, not even particularly for herself. She farmed. She fixed what broke. She fed Bishop from the pot whenever she made stew, because he preferred it that way, and she didn't see the point of arguing with the one creature who never left. She was mending wire along the east fence on a Thursday morning in late August when she heard the truck. It came slow down the gravel road the way vehicles do when they're not entirely sure of the address. A blue half-ton, older, the kind of truck that has done real work and shows it. It stopped at the gate and a man got out. He stood at the fence line and called across to her, not coming in without permission, which she noted. "Looking for Nora Sinclair," he said. "You found her," she said, not moving from the fence. He walked to the gate. He was older, late 50s, maybe 60, with the hands of someone who had spent his life outdoors, and the eyes of someone who'd spent just as long thinking. He held his hat in both hands the way men do when they're asking something of you. "My name is Raymond Prue," he said. "I was a friend of your father's. We worked together up near Prince Albert. Oh, must be 25 years ago now." He paused. "I'm sorry about Walter. I wasn't able to make the service." She had heard her father mention Raymond once or twice. A logger turned rancher. "Honest man," her father had said. The quiet kind of honest, not the kind that announces itself. "What do you need, Mr. Prue?" she asked. He reached inside his jacket and brought out an envelope, creased at the corners from being folded and refolded. "I need you to read this," he said. "And I need to ask you something that you're going to say no to." She looked at him for a long moment. Bishop appeared from somewhere and sat down beside her boot, watching the stranger with calm professional interest. "You'd better come in," she said. She read the letter at the kitchen table, while Raymond sat across from her with his hat on his knee and a cup of tea he hadn't touched. The letter was from her father. She had not known he wrote it. She had not known he'd given it to Raymond 6 months before he died, with instructions to hold it until, as he'd written, the time felt necessary. Her father had never been a man for sentimentality. He wrote the way he spoke, short sentences, no decoration, like he was paying by the word and watching the budget. "Nora, if Raymond has brought this to you, it's because my girl Isabeau needed somewhere to go, and I asked him to ask you. Her mother was Métis, from the Lac La Ronge area. Good people, all of them. Isabeau is 28, and she is in a difficult situation that is not her fault and not mine to explain in full. Raymond knows the rest. What I know is this: she is capable and proud, and she will not take charity. But she needs a season, a place to work honestly and get herself sorted. I know you have the room. I know you have the work. I also know you've been alone out there longer than is good for you, and I say that with love, not criticism. You were always better with people than you let yourself believe. Think about it. That's all I'm asking." It was signed Dad and nothing else. She put the letter down. She looked at Raymond. "He told me you'd probably say it wasn't your problem," Raymond said. "He wasn't wrong. He also told me to tell you that he knew you'd sit with it for a while before you said no, and that the sitting was the important part. She pushed the letter to the side of the table. Outside the window, the wind moved through the wheat in its long, slow way. Bishop had fallen asleep under her chair. "Where is she?" Nora asked. "In the truck," Raymond said. Isabeau Prue was Raymond's niece. She had her uncle's eyes, careful and clear, and the posture of a person who had learned to take up less space than she was entitled to. She stood outside the truck with a canvas bag over one shoulder and a cardboard box under her arm, and she looked at Nora the way you look at a door you're not certain will open. "I want to say something before we go inside," Isabeau said. She had a directness that Nora immediately recognized as a defense mechanism, the kind that gets built when people have too often taken your directness for aggression. "I'm not here because I want someone to fix things for me. I'm here because your father was the only person my uncle trusted enough to ask, and my uncle is the only person I trust." So, she adjusted the strap on her bag. "If you say no, I understand. I've been turned away before." Nora looked at her. The box under her arm had the corner of a sketchbook sticking out of it. "What's your skill set?" Nora asked. "Fencing. Engine repair. Small stuff, ATVs, generators. I worked 3 seasons on a cattle operation north of Meadow Lake. I can cook, but I won't make promises about it being good." "What happened in Meadow Lake?" Isabeau's jaw moved once. "The man who owned the operation decided my continued employment required something I wasn't willing to provide." Nora said nothing for a moment. The wind pushed across the yard and lifted a strand of Isabeau's hair, and she pushed it back without looking away. "There's a room off the back of the house," Nora said. "Separate entrance. Bathroom down the hall. Supper's at 7 and I don't wait on it." She turned toward the door, then stopped with her hand on the frame. "One thing, I don't talk about Marcus. I don't explain him, I don't discuss what happened, and I don't want sympathy about it. If you've heard anything, you've heard enough." Isabeau nodded once. "I have one condition too," she said. Nora turned. "I'm not here to be a project." She said it quietly, but without apology. "I'm not a lesson or a cause or a reason for someone to feel good about themselves. I'm here to work." Nora looked at her for a long moment. Something in her chest shifted slightly, the way a door shifts when it's been closed so long the frame has warped around it. "Then go get your box," she said. "And your uncle's staying for supper." The first 3 weeks were built on routine and respectful distance. Isabeau was up before Nora most mornings, which Nora discovered when she came downstairs to find the coffee already made and the dog already fed. She fixed the south pasture gate properly. Not the temporary wire loop Nora had been re-looping for 2 seasons, but a real repair with a new post and hardware. She diagnosed the tractor's fuel line problem on the 2nd day and had the parts ordered by the 3rd. She did not offer opinions about the house. She did not rearrange the kitchen. She did not comment on the photograph of Marcus that Nora had never gotten around to taking down from the hallway. She simply walked past it each morning on her way to the back door, as though it were part of the architecture. In the evenings, she drew. Nora didn't ask about the sketchbook at first. She could see it from across the kitchen sometimes when Isabeau sat at the far end of the table with the light on. A worn thing, full, from the look of the spine. She'd buy a new one in town and fill that too, starting from the back for some reason Nora didn't understand and didn't ask about. On the 18th day, the ATV tipped in the east coulee. Nora had been alone in the coulee, and the ATV had gone sideways in the soft bank and come down hard on its left side with her underneath it. Not pinned badly, her arm was free, her legs were clear, but the machine weighed 400 pounds and the angle was wrong, and she couldn't get leverage. Isabeau appeared at the top of the coulee 15 minutes later, assessed the situation without speaking, and climbed down. "Don't pull," she said, crouching next to the machine. "You'll tear something. Let me get the angle first." They got it up together. Nora stood and checked herself. Nothing broken, a bruised hip, mud from the shoulder down. "You went out without the radio," Isabeau said. "I always go out without the radio. I know." She handed Nora her hat, which had come off in the fall. "That's the problem." She started back up the coulee bank without waiting to be thanked. That night, Nora noticed where Isabeau was sitting at supper. Not across the table anymore. Closer, not close, but closer. Neither of them mentioned it. It was the sketchbook that changed things. Nora came into the kitchen one evening to find it open on the table, unattended. Isabeau had stepped outside and left it there, which was either an accident or not. Nora didn't look deliberately, but the page was open. It was a drawing of the farmyard. Charcoal, careful and exact, the way technical drawings are made, except this wasn't technical. It was particular. The lean of the old granary, exactly. The way the line of spruce along the north side threw shade across the yard in the late afternoon, those long diagonal shadows she'd stopped seeing years ago. The tractor parked at an angle she recognized as Tuesday, specifically, because of where she'd left it when the fuel line problem started. There was a crow on the fence post near the water trough that Nora recognized as the one that came every morning, and had for 3 years, and which she had never told anyone about because it had seemed like the kind of thing you didn't say out loud. Isabeau came back inside and saw her standing over the sketchbook. She didn't apologize. She waited. "How long did this take you?" Nora asked. "An evening, maybe less." Nora looked at the crow on the fence post for another moment. "He comes every morning," she said, "around 7. I used to put out a bit of bread for him, but I stopped when She stopped. "I just stopped." "I know," Isabeau said quietly. "He waits by the post a few minutes and then goes." Nora set the sketchbook down carefully. "You should be doing this instead of fixing my fences." "A person needs both," Isabeau said. "The fences keep the cattle. The drawing keeps me." Nora looked at the page one more time. Then she said, "Would you draw something for me? Anything you want." Isabeau looked at her, not with surprise, but with the particular look of someone measuring something they've been measuring for a while. "I know what it'll be," she said. 4 days later, she gave Nora a drawing. It was the kitchen window, the view from outside looking in. The light on in the early morning, the coffee pot on the counter, Bishop asleep on the kitchen floor with his nose on his paws, and at the table, just visible, a woman sitting alone. Not sad, not content, just present, staying. Nora stood with it in her hands for a long time. That evening, Isabeau wasn't at supper. Nora found her outside, sitting on the back step with her knees up, looking out at the tree line where the sun was finishing off the last of the light. "Isabeau." She looked up. Her eyes were dry, but had been recently otherwise. "There's something I didn't tell you," she said, "that my uncle didn't tell you either, because he thought it would change the answer." Nora sat down beside her on the step. "The situation at Meadow Lake. It's not just that I lost the job." She kept her eyes on the tree line. "The man who owned the operation filed a complaint with the labor board. False one. Said I'd damaged equipment deliberately. Cost him money. I fought it, and I'll win eventually, but until it's resolved, I can't get a reference from anyone who knows that file exists, which means most operations in the province." She exhaled. "I have until October. If I don't have something documented, a formal work record somewhere, the board can sanction me out of agricultural work entirely while the case is ongoing, and I can't afford a lawyer, and the one legal aid contact I have is booked through November." Nora was quiet for a long time. A nighthawk went overhead in its low, tilting arc. "Why didn't your uncle put this in the letter?" she asked. Isabeau looked at her then, and her voice was steady but carrying all the weight of someone who had worked very hard to make it so. "Because he said Walter's daughter would help someone who needed help, but not someone who needed rescuing. He wanted you to want me here, not to feel responsible for me." A pause. "I'm not sure he was right about me being the kind of person who deserves the distinction. There's a particular kind of trust in that. A dying man's friend choosing not to explain the emergency, because he understood that what the person on the receiving end needed was to choose freely first. I've been turning that over since I heard this story. The love it takes to do something like that, the faith." Nora looked out at the tree line for a long moment. "There are 2 things I can do," she said finally. "I can document your work here formally. I should have had a contract from the start anyway, dated from your first day." She paused. "And my cousin is a paralegal in Saskatoon." She's not a lawyer, but she knows people who owe her favors, and she does not let bad faith labor complaints go past her without bleeding them a little. Isabeau stared at the ground. You don't have to. I know I don't. Nora stood up. Come inside. The coffee's still hot, and I want to know everything that happened at Meadow Lake so I can tell my cousin exactly where to start. They drove into Willow Bend together on the last Friday of September for supplies. Nora had been dreading it. Willow Bend was a town of 1,400 people, and a memory like an elephant, and she knew what some of them thought about her, the woman whose husband left, the one who stayed, the one who hadn't done anything interesting enough to update the narrative. She felt the looks when they tied the truck outside the co-op, some curious, some counting, the way small towns count things. Inside, Darlene Parrish behind the counter, who had known Nora since primary school and held that over her in the comfortable way of old acquaintances, gave Isabeau a long look, not unfriendly, assessing. New help, she said to Nora. Best mechanic in the county, Nora said, which was true as far as she knew, and she'd decided some time ago to say true things out loud. Outside, loading the truck, a man named Terrence Vogel, who owned land to the west and had opinions about everything adjacent to it, came to stand near the tailgate with his thumbs in his belt loops. Heard you've got a prue girl staying out there, he said. The word girl landed the way such words do when men like Terrence use them. Not quite an insult, but not quite not one either. Nora didn't look up from the tailgate. I have Isabeau Prue working my operation, she said, and she's done more in 8 weeks than that fence line of yours has seen in 8 years. So, she closed the tailgate. You have a good day, Terrence. She felt Isabeau go still beside her. She didn't look at her. On the road home, the quiet between them was different from the quiet before, warmer, carrying more in it. You didn't have to do that, Isabeau said. It was true, Nora said, and some things need saying. Isabeau looked out the passenger window at the wide, flat gold of the fields going past. After a moment, she said, My mother used to say that the land out here only keeps the people who say true things to it. Smart woman, she was. A beat. She died when I was 16. Complications after a surgery that should have been routine. In a hospital that was underfunded because of where it was and who it served. The truck hummed along the gravel. I'm sorry, Nora said. I know. Isabeau kept her eyes on the fields. It's one of those things where the sorry doesn't touch it. But I don't mind when people say it honestly. There was a letter waiting at the house when they got back. Official envelope, return address from the rural municipality office. Nora read it at the kitchen table, while Isabeau put the supplies away without being asked. A man named Boyd Scriver, who held a land interest east of the property, had filed a notice of claim against a portion of Nora's east pasture, 40 acres, the ones along the creek. The claim cited a lapsed boundary agreement from the 1990s. It was, on its face, a legal document. It was, below that, a threat. Nora had seen the name before. Boyd Scriver had been trying to consolidate land in the area for 3 years. He'd gotten 2 operations already. Both times, the person he was after had been alone, without resources, and had settled. She put the letter face down on the table. Scriver? Isabeau said. She'd seen the envelope. You know him? My uncle sold to him. He didn't want to. He ran out of room to refuse. She came around the table and looked at the letter without touching it. He'll have someone watch the property to see if you have the backing to fight. Nora looked at her. How do you know that? Because he did it to my uncle. There was a man who sat at the end of the road for 3 days in a gray pickup before the offer came. She paused. He's looking for isolated. He needs you to be alone for the claim to hold. Nora sat with that for a moment. She called her cousin in Saskatchewan that night. And then she called the rural municipality office. And then she called a woman she knew in the agricultural legal clinic 2 towns over, who had a filing she'd been meaning to do about boundary agreements from that same decade. She did not call anyone to ask for help with Isabeau's situation. She'd already done that. Isabeau's file was in motion. But she sat at the kitchen table at 11 o'clock that night, with the letter in front of her and Bishop asleep against her foot, and she admitted something she hadn't let herself look at directly. She did not want Isabeau to leave in October. It wasn't obligation. Charlie's letter had started it. Raymond's trust had framed it. But neither of those things was what she felt now. What she felt was harder to name. It had grown in the fencing and the fuel line and the coulee and the crow on the fence post and the kitchen window drawn from the outside, looking in. She was afraid of it, in the way you're afraid of something true, that you haven't found the language for yet. She told her cousin to prioritize Isabeau's labor file. Her cousin, who had heard enough of Nora's voice over the years to read the spaces between sentences, said simply, "All right," and asked no questions. 3 days later, the gray pickup appeared at the end of the road. It sat there for 2 hours. Nora watched it from the kitchen window. Isabeau came and stood beside her and also watched it, and neither of them said anything, and after 2 hours it left. "He'll come in person next," Isabeau said. "I know," said Nora. Scriver came on a Tuesday with a man she didn't recognize, and the particular self-possession of someone who has done this before and found it easy. He drove in without stopping at the gate, which told Nora what she needed to know about how he saw the situation. Isabeau was repairing the water line near the barn. Nora was in the yard. Scriver walked past Nora toward Isabeau, which also told her what she needed to know. "I've got a matter to discuss with the person living on the property," he said. "You're discussing it with her," Nora said. He turned. "She's my partner in this operation," Nora said, and it was only half a legal statement, and she knew Isabeau had heard her say it, and she didn't take it back. "Which makes your boundary claim a matter for both of us and our legal representative." She held up her phone. "Who I have on the line right now if you'd like to speak to her." Scriver looked at her. He was the kind of man who recalculated when the room changed. The room had changed. "We'll be in touch," he said. "I'm sure you will," Nora said. He left. His man went with him. Nora lowered the phone. Her cousin's voice came from the speaker. "That was good. Don't hang up yet. I need you to write down what he said word for word while it's fresh." Isabeau had not moved from the water line. When Nora looked over, she was looking back with an expression that held several things at once and didn't try to hide any of them. "Partner," she said. "In the operation," Nora said. "Right." A pause. "Is that what we're calling it?" The wind came through the yard and moved the wheat at the field's edge in its slow, true way. Overhead, a hawk turned in a long, unhurried circle. "I don't know what word fits yet," Nora said. "I know the word comes after the decision." Isabeau looked at her for a long time, the way she'd looked at the farmyard when she was drawing it, finding what was real beneath the surface. "My uncle said your father was the most straightforward person he ever met," she said. "He had his moments. He was right about you too," she said quietly. She turned back to the water line. "I'll think about it," she said. And it was not a yes, but it was not a no, and both of them understood the difference. October came in gray and cold, the way it does on the prairie, not a gradual cooling, but a declaration. The harvest was in. The east fence was solid. The tractor ran without hesitation. The labor complaint against Isabeau had been formally countered. The timeline pushed back. The bad faith elements documented. Scriver's boundary claim had been answered with a 1994 survey and 3 witness affidavits that Nora's cousin had located in 48 hours because she was, as she put it, extremely annoyed on your behalf. Isabeau did not leave at the end of the season. She didn't say so with a speech. She said so by moving the last of her things from the cardboard box into the chest of drawers in her room. By telling Nora she'd found a deal on winter feed if they ordered before the 15th. By sitting across from her at the kitchen table on a Thursday evening in the particular, comfortable way of people who have decided, without a formal announcement, that they are staying. On a Sunday evening in the 3rd week of October, Nora took the photograph of Marcus down from the hallway. She didn't throw it out. She put it in the cedar box in the closet where she kept things she wasn't ready to decide about. The hallway looked different after that. Empty, but in the way that space is empty before it becomes something, not a loss, but an opening. Isabeau was in the kitchen when she came back. She looked at Nora, and then at the hallway, and then back, and she didn't say anything, because she understood that some things are done and not announced. They were married the following June in the backyard of Nora's cousin's house in Saskatchewan, with Raymond as a witness and Bishop in attendance in his capacity as the most dignified creature on the property. It was small. It was exactly right. The farm went on as farms do. The fence held, the cattle came through winter clean, the tractor started on the coldest mornings without argument. A garden appeared along the south side of the house in careful rows, things Isabeau's mother had grown that she'd been carrying in seed packets for years, waiting for ground that felt like hers. In the winter, Nora came in from the barn one afternoon to find a drawing on the kitchen table. Isabeau was outside, and the drawing was there alone, as if it had been left to be found. It was the farmyard in winter. The snow on the granary roof at a particular angle, the dog's tracks crossing the yard and back, 2 sets of boot prints coming in from the barn side, parallel, nearly the same stride length, and above it, the wide Saskatchewan sky, enormous and clear, full of the kind of light that only exists up here, that cold particular blue that means the air has gone still and the world is, for this moment, exactly itself. Nora stood with it in her hands until she heard the back door. "You left this out," she said. "I know," said Isabeau. Outside, the prairie held its long silence. The crow landed on the fence post by the water trough, the same one he always used, and settled his wings and waited to see if there was bread. There was. There had been again for some months now. Put there in the early morning before the day began, by a woman who had decided, quietly and without announcement, that she was not done yet.